For our project, we looked at Chicago establishment inspections and tested to see if there were differences in results from food establishments versus non-food establishments. The data set we used contained information from inspections performed by the Chicago Department of Public Health Food Protection Program. Those results were then reviewed by a state of Illinois licensed environmental health practitioner. The data set itself is hosted by the City of Chicago, and it contains 17 variables and over 180,000 observations.
Looking in this observation, we decided to look at what the results were for many establishments in Chicago. As you can see in the graph here, most of them have a result of pass, with the second most common frequency of results being fail.
Another one of the graphs that we looked at, just to sort of explore the data, we looked at the risks and the amount of, or the count for each risk that there was. Most inspections did have a risk 1.
All right, after counting all the risk and results, we decided to combine the both and see what the relationship between each other are. Graphically, there doesn't necessarily seem to be any obvious linear relationship between the two factors.
So here we see that this might be because risk 1 or high-risk establishments make up a large proportion of establishments that receive any given result. Risk 2 or medium-risk establishments also spread throughout each result category. And then risk 3 or low-risk results are primarily out of business.
As we continue to look at the relationship between risk and result, we decide to put them both together again in a graph and see which ones occurred most frequently with the results. As you can see here, the circles that are the biggest are primarily in the pass category, as shown in the graphs before, as that was the most frequent result for most establishments. In absolute terms, the largest risk to result group is establishments that are high risk and that they also pass. This is true for approximately 60,000 establishments in Chicago.
So looking at the graphs for longitude and latitude, there didn't seem to be much of a pattern that suggested that establishments in certain areas would test a certain way, like certain neighborhoods having a worse score.
So this exploratory phase helped us ultimately discern which relationships would be best to test with a simple regression, and led us to specify this model, where results is the response variable and then facility type is a dummy indicator explanatory variable. And here results will take the value of 1 when observations pass inspections and take the value of 0 when observations fail inspections. Facility type here is 1 when an establishment is primarily a food establishment, so like if it's a bakery or a coffee shop or restaurant, and then 0 if not. So to prepare our data for this simple regression, we cleaned the data in the following ways.
So to begin, we fixed the Chicago spellings. We narrowed it all down just to Chicago, so we removed some smaller towns that were not in Chicago. After that, we narrowed the facility types, such as bakeries, coffee shops, and restaurants, to just being food.
After we narrowed down these facility types into 3 different things to be considered food establishments, we turned the facility type into a numerical category to make it easier to do a linear regression with that. We changed the food establishments to have a value of 1, and then the not-a-food establishments that didn't qualify as a food establishment, such as bakeries, coffee shops, and restaurants, we turned that to 0. And then after that, we took the results, and if it passed, and if it was a pass with condition, it was given a value of 1, and then if it failed, it was given a value of 0, just so we could have a better understanding with our linear regression model.
So ultimately, we find through a simple regression that facility types like bakeries, coffee shops, and restaurants, in other words, establishments that are primarily in food service, are 0.0338 percentage points more likely to pass as opposed to failing than their non-food counterparts. And this aligns with intuition because perhaps establishments that are completely devoted to the business of cooking and serving food are more likely to pass an inspection since there's more on the line. Making food is their primary means of making money, or they just operate with industry-specific procedures that safeguard against violations, opposed to some of the other non-food establishments in this data set like hospitals or daycares.